It's a good shot of an egret. We've had all this rain from the tropical storm. It's all flooded in here. So normally that would be, I mean it's marsh, but normally that would be pretty dry right there where the egret's at. And of course there's a ditch runs back there, just you can see it. And that's always got water in it, but you can see how high the water is in the ditch. And so now the egret is probably sitting there catching fish and minnows and things right where it's at, which is, you know, a little bit off the bank of the ditch. But because the marsh is flooded, that's where it's fishing. Yeah. They're neat birds. Iconic. I think there's two. There's a great white egret, which I guess is what that is, I believe. Like there's a great blue heron, and then there's a lesser blue heron. I think it's the same with the egret, the white egret, or maybe, I don't know. Or maybe it's just that they have a little bit smaller. Maybe that's not how the terminology is, but anyhow. They've got one of the longest wingspans. Bitty bird. Same with the blue heron. They make that loud, that croaking noise with a long neck. The birds with the long necks kind of make a pterodactyl sound. You kind of got to imagine that was a little bit what it was like. You see one of those big herring or egrets, and you can kind of, especially when they sit far off in the distance and you can just see their silhouette, you kind of can imagine that's might be a little bit, and you hear them, you can imagine that might be a little bit what it was like to see a pterodactyl. Of course, the birds and the dinosaurs were closely related in terms of the big scale of things. The mammals and the birds had a common ancestor with the dinosaurs. And the alligators. Sometimes, I don't know, I have to go back and look at this stuff, but the alligator, or the crocodilia, alligators, crocodiles, they're somewhat different than most of the other reptiles. It's those crocodilia, the birds. Crocodilia and the birds have the common ancestor with the dinosaurs, actually. And with the mammals, you got to go back further. So there's but the little mammals, the small mammals, like they with the warm-blooded, the warm-blooded little small mammals were better equipped to survive the conditions that led to the extinction of the dinosaurs. Likewise, the birds, same with the birds. And they're warm-blooded, and they have, you know, the feathers to protect them, and they weren't as large, so they didn't have their metabolism wasn't as high as the dinosaurs. They didn't need as much energy, food, nutrition, whatever. I guess there are other factors too, but and then the crocodilia, lower metabolism, get to hibernate, different survival mechanisms. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. I haven't really studied it that deeply. That's the neat thing about the internet, though. If you want to learn about it, you can just, those are the types of things you can easily Google and learn about, or go to a library and get a book. Books have their own unique, they make a different kind of impression, I think, than just reading and studying off the internet. But the internet is so accessible, and so you kind of get the pros and cons of both books and the internet. But the search process for finding a book in and of itself makes you think, and kind of helps to wire your brain. Just that effort that you have to go through and hunting down the information, that in and of itself is part of the learning process. And then there's something about having to actually touch and flip through the pages and then go from book to book. You got to put more work in, and so your brain has to focus more on the information and the situation. So there's a good combination of using fast information from the internet and doing deeper research, And you can do that too. I mean, if you're really getting into something where you're looking it up on the internet, you might create a file and then you go back and study and read things more in depth. Perhaps even print some things off, and so that you can access it later as your mind processes some things. All those are writing things down and summarizing things. It's a major learning technique, part of the learning process. When people talk about doing well in school, like there's methods to use to help yourself do better as a student. One of those techniques is to write down notes as you read through a chapter of a book over on the side, and kind of summarize each paragraph or important thing in your own words, and then as you finish a chapter or whatever, go back and then put more detail into your notes, and in things that you missed or didn't get right. And so you're writing these down, and as you write them down and then rehash it, you're reinforcing the information. And people also, you can do the same kind of note cards, or a similar thing. You write down your own questions on the note cards with your own handwriting, and then the own answers on the other side, and then and then you go back and use, and then you put the note cards away for a little while, and then you pull them back out, and then you go through them and see if you can answer the questions that you created for yourself. There's many things like that, but they all are helpful to reinforcing information and becoming proficient, and maybe even an expert if you're dedicated enough to a certain area of study. And they're all important ways to help you learn something. I don't know if the tide's going to keep coming up. It rained so much, and it rained a lot inland, so there still may be a lot of surge of water coming down the rivers to fill in. And I think there's another storm. It's a long ways away, but so there's no telling where it's going to actually end up. But there's another storm that's just come off of Africa, and so who knows, in another week we might have another storm off the coast, or making landfall, and this ground won't be dried out by then, so that could be a situation for a lot of flooding. See, it's almost dry, or it is just pretty much dry and muddy underneath the bridge here, and it's quite deep, so that's why the egret was over there, and the marsh is kind of standing in one of these spots where it would normally be, just on the bridge or something like that. I love you.